Roblox is a name that most people are familiar with and likely think of as like a playground for children. And while it is true in a way, there are a few disturbing images and games that have snuck their way into Roblox, and in this video, we're going to look at each of them and identify where they come from and the backstories for each. Now, the first character that I want to look at is actually going to be Granny, which is basically the same as the original Granny from 2017, which of course was a spin-off of the Slenderman series. But something that I found more interesting is the fact that people started to say that this game was actually based on a real-life Russian serial killer named the Granny Ripper, or aka the Baba Yaga. Now, while many of you probably have never heard of the Granny Ripper, you've probably heard of the Baba Yaga either through Russian folklore or you've watched the John Wick movies. Now, the Granny Ripper was born in 1947, which would make her 76 years old, and after her husband mysteriously disappeared, the Granny Ripper went on to rent out her rooms in her apartment, and she used that as a way to actually get people into her house so that she could kill them. She would literally chop up their bodies, and there's even video footage showing her take the victims outside to dispose of the bodies. And some of the stories even claim that she was a cannibal because, you know, chopping people up wasn't enough. While people argue about if this is a legit inspiration for Granny, I will say that regardless, it does kind of fit. Next, I want to talk about this image of a Dolphin Man. Now, this image has popped up from time to time on the internet over the last 10 to 15 years. Many of you may recognize it from a viral video on TikTok/YouTube from the Life of Luxury channel. The funny thing is though, this video doesn't actually have anything to do with the image from Roblox. The image actually is from a channel called North Fur, which actually has a ton of content that's basically like talking about costumes and crazy animal muzzles. This channel has been around on YouTube for well over 10 years, and without context, it is weird, or at least weird enough for people to make up some ridiculous lore about it, or simply deem it creepy. But in 2022, the North Fur channel actually made a video addressing this issue and explaining why the videos look so creepy back in the day.
Many people have pointed out that older videos are creepy, and you are absolutely right. They are. A big chunk of that was due to the fact that they were recorded on really old first-gen digital cameras. They were recorded in like 2004, 2006. In that time frame, there weren't very many good digital cameras on the market.
And a fun fact, the North Fur YouTube channel actually has a link on their channel that will direct viewers to a store where you can actually buy different masks, paints, and just general accessories for costumes. And when you look at all this context, the image is actually much less creepy. The second game I want to talk about here is going to be The Mimic, and this game actually surprised me because if you're like me, you probably thought that this game was going to be based off the South Korean urban legend called the Jangsun Tiger, which is basically a creature that lures people into its hunting grounds by mimicking voices, usually taking on like the voice of a screaming woman. The scary part about this creature is that it can take on pretty much any voice, so it can pretend to be a child, an old woman, whatever it thought would get the person into like the kill zone. But to my surprise, the Mimic actually has nothing to do with that particular character. This game actually focuses on several characters from Japanese urban legends, the character Hayachi being the first on this list. For those of you who actually watched Cory Kenshin's Spooky Scary Sunday back in the day, you may actually recognize the character that Hachi is based off. Some people call her Miss 8 feet tall, or more proper, Hachisaka-sama. And in urban legends, she's literally 8 feet tall, which is how she got her name, and she's exclusively known to prey on children that are preteens, meaning that anybody who's under the age of 13 is her likely victim. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if you're older than that, you're safe. In rare cases, she has been known to go after full-fledged adults, especially if she tried to capture them when they were children and she failed somehow. Now, the reason that she prefers to stalk young children instead of adults is that children are so naive and innocent that they may not actually know that they're in danger when they first see her. And since young children are still so deeply dependent on their parents and elders, the entity will use her ability to mimic voices. And with this, she'll pretend to be like their father, mother, grandparent, or whatever and get the kid to come to them. And by the time the child realizes that that's not their elder, it's too late. The saddest part about this is that the children usually didn't do anything to actually deserve this death. In Japanese folklore, a lot of female ghosts kill simply because they themselves had a bad death and want revenge on anything that's living. If you didn't understand my Spooky Scary Sunday reference earlier, I was talking about the video that Corey reacted to that was from Snarled.
Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary?
With that being said, the next character we're going to talk about is going to be Shizu, who is actually based on the lore of Takaano, or aka the Tall Woman. These ghosts are interesting because they feed off a person's desire, and as such, they exclusively haunt the red light district. And for those of you that probably don't know what a red light district is, think about season 2 of Demon Slayer, and that's pretty much it. Now, when these particular ghosts were alive, they were basically women that people found too unattractive to marry or even find work in the red light district. Once they died, their jealousy corrupted their soul and kept them from passing to the afterlife. And now they just prowl around perving on people in the red light district. The good news with this ghost is that they don't actually really want to attack people, so they're relatively harmless as long as you don't mind somebody peeking through your windows at night. Next on the list we have Kariko, who in my opinion is the creepiest character in this game, and I believe that she is based off Kyoko, aka the terrifying chick from The Grudge. The legend says that this character was taken out by her husband because she caught feelings for another man, and in her death, she haunts her home and curses anybody that enters. And some of you may be too young to remember the movie The Grudge, but just like Kariko here in the game, the Grudge lady also does a bunch of weird walks where like she cracks her bones and all this type of stuff. Next up we have the character named Megumi, who is actually based on the Japanese lore of Roko Rokubi. And this is a creature that seems to be a regular woman during the day, but once nightfall, her body actually sleeps like a normal person, but her neck and head can basically stretch to crazy length. And with that being said, at night, her head and neck will literally like stalk around and catch small animals like rats, eating them while also drinking all the oil from lamps. The sad part about this character is that they started off as a human, but were later cursed. And sometimes it would be because like they cheated on their husband or something to that degree, but a lot of times it was because like their father committed a crime, so now the little girl had to be punished, or something that their husband did, so now they're being punished. So a lot of time they really had no choice, and it was not their fault that they became this weird demon. The next image I want to talk about is going to be this one called Smile Dog, which is a classic creepypasta story from back in 2008. Now, as the name implies, Smile Dog is literally a dog, but the scary part here is that anybody who actually sees this dog will become his prey, meaning that Smile Dog will actually hunt them down and then it will take their life. Now, even though you can't really tell in this picture, Smile Dog is actually a husky, even though a lot of people think that he's some type of like demonic Labrador. Here's the original picture to prove it. Apparently, this image was super saturated and fake teeth and curtains were added to the background to create this classic creepypasta image. Next up, we'll look at the SCP-173, and for those of you that don't know, SCP stories are very similar to like old school creepypastas or even grim dark stories. And SCP stands for Special Contamination Procedure Foundation and basically deals with many paranormal creatures. Now, 173 is a concrete statue that somehow has been animated, and to make matters worse, it is very hostile. The only way to keep it in check is to keep it locked away, and if you do need to interact with it, you must maintain eye contact. In the actual origin story of this character, it said that at least 3 people have to enter his room when they're trying to clean it or do anything, so that somebody is always maintaining eye contact with it. It's even so bad to where people have to inform the others when they're going to blink, that way they all don't blink at the same time. Now, for whatever reason the eye contact is broken, 173 will basically dash at you and snap your neck. Now, the image that we see in Roblox is actually from an artist that goes by the name of Azuma Kato, and it's called the Untitled 2004. Now, I don't know why this old man is in this picture, but he looks like he is having a good time with this statue. Yeah, boy. Next up is Slenderman, who is another creepypasta character and is known as a supernatural creature that roams around the forest. One of the most terrifying facts about Slender is that he's not super aggressive, but instead likes to stalk his prey for years before he actually gets them. And I think the reason behind this is because he really likes to slowly torture his victims in a psychological way. And when he finally does decide to catch his prey, his favorite way to kill them is to impale them on trees. And then he simply lets them leak out until they expire. And if that's not bad enough, once they're no longer alive, he takes out all their important body parts, puts them in plastic bags, and then puts them back into the person's body. The only bright side about having Slenderman after you is that electronics usually pick up his signal when he's around. So like cameras, television, radios will start to act up when he's close to you, meaning that if you stay vigilant, you may actually be able to avoid him. But that's definitely a huge maybe. Now, most of the Slenderman artwork seems to just be regular artwork that has been made on the internet somewhere or another, but this image right here is the actual professionally made one. This is the actual image that was made for the Slenderman documentary, which talks about a real life situation with 2 girls, technically 3 girls, but I don't really want to get into it because it is super dark. I'll let you look that up on your own. Next, we have an image of a character named Jeff the Killer, and while this image is pretty creepy looking, it's actually just an edited version of this woman here. Now apparently there are a couple of other images that people think is the original, but this is the one that looks the most accurate in my opinion. Now while the history of the image is pretty simple, Jeff's backstory is a lot darker and a bit more convoluted. Jeff's story begins when he was 13 years old and he and his family basically moved to a new neighborhood, and his family consisted of his mother, father, and his little brother Louie. Now shortly after moving to this new neighborhood, the boys were actually threatened by 3 bullies who even had the nerves to pull out knives on them. Jeff, being a pretty good big brother, actually beat up these boys really badly, and his little brother Louie actually took the blame so that Jeff wouldn't get too much trouble. Now even though Jeff was probably in the right for beating up those kids, for whatever reason he got really depressed when his brother took the blame for him, and then later on when those bullies came back again, Jeff actually ended up taking one of their lives. But in the process, one of the kids actually threw bleach all over him and then lit him on fire, and almost been burned alive literally made Jeff lose his mind. When he woke up in the hospital, he was completely disfigured, but for whatever reason, he actually loved his new appearance. And even though it was obvious that he was going through like a manic episodes, the doctor still let him leave the hospital. The saddest part here is that when he got home, he ended up taking out his entire family. And from that point on, Jeff basically went on a rampage, taking out a ton of people, especially those that refused to sleep at night. And this is also why he renamed himself Jeff the Killer, because obviously he was killing a ton of people. Next, we have the image from the Russian sleep experiment, and the story behind this one is actually kind of funny because it's simply a Halloween decoration. And as you see here, you can just pick it up at Walmart for a little over $100 or so. So it seems like the original image was just somebody buying this prop and then setting him up in a creepy way to take some pictures, and then they made the pictures black and white. Now while the story behind the image may be kind of funny, the actual creepypasta is terrifying. The creepypasta deals with Russian researchers back in the late 1940s who kept 5 people awake for 15 days using a type of gas, and as you would suspect, the 5 prisoners ended up going completely crazy due to lack of sleep. And while this may not sound like a big deal, if you go too long without sleeping, you don't only just lose your mind, but your body, like your organs, can literally shut down as well. It's why after 3 days, your body will literally force you to fall asleep. Unless, of course, there's some outside force making you stay awake, like in this incident here. Next up, we have this image of a character named Eyeless Jack, and while this image does look pretty creepy, it would seem that this is simply a high school Photoshop project from back in the day, and then it was taken later on and used for this creepypasta cover art. And truly, the Eyeless Jack story is actually pretty disturbing. Eyeless Jack is basically like a humanoid entity who removes the organs of his victims and eats them. One of the things that makes him so dangerous is that he can open a person up, take the organ of his choice, and then close them up without them even knowing. Meaning that you can be walking around missing a kidney thinking everything is cool. Another creepy fact about Jack is that he's known to go after people while they are sleeping, which kind of explains the original photo of him staring down at somebody while they're lying in their bed. The next image is called The Pale Lady, and while many of you may recognize this image from the 2019 movie called Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, where horror stories basically came alive from a book, the first appearance of this character was actually spoken by an old author by the name of Augustus Hare. In his autobiography, he speaks about an older woman who used to be very happy and healthy, but suddenly turned pale and tired looking. Doctors said that the woman suffered from something called phantasmagoria, which basically means that she was seeing strange images while she dreamed and also while she was awake. The woman said that she was seeing a man that was basically calling her towards death, and this is why the woman started to look so drained and pale. The original story is definitely more sad than scary because in actuality, the old woman probably just got a disease and was actually just getting closer to death, so she was actually just seeing things. The next image we have on our list is going to be called The Rake, and the backstory for this image is interesting. Many people say that it was a promotional image for a video game called Resistance 3, and it's supposed to be an enemy from the game called a Grim. And while there are a lot of stories about the Rake, the creepiest fact about it for me is that the Rake is often said to creep into bedrooms, induce nightmares, and watch the dreamer for a while before killing them. And on a lighter note, I also think it's kind of funny that the Rake ended up making it on the news because people actually thought this was a real image.
Can put them in our newscast. Well, you gotta see what one viewer claims his friend found at a hunting camp in Berwick. I really don't even know what that is. The guy who sent it in didn't want us to mention his name, but tells us this is totally for real. He says last weekend his friend's family found one of their hunting camps destroyed, but the SIM card was still there, and so was this crazy image.
Now this last image is from the game Piggy, and this one was the easiest one because it's basically just a mix between Granny and Peppa Pig. You can obviously tell that it's heavily influenced by Granny because of the nightgowns that they're wearing, just like Granny, and also their weapon of choice. And if you actually play through the game, you can tell by the names of the characters that it's heavily influenced off Peppa Pig. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this video on the screen here, and let me know if you want me to take a look at some more creepy images from Roblox. This is Orseofkorse. Thanks for watching. Peace.